Hi there, I'm Paula Heller Garland with the University of North Texas Recovery to Practice and our Addiction Studies program here. And I'm so excited to be here today with Rick Bingham, who has a pretty awesome story that he's told in the addiction community for a while. So I invited him here today to share his story of the purple bandana with us.
Is that it, Paula? Is that all the introduction I get?
That's it.
Yeah. Well, we'll go with that. Hello, everybody. I'm glad to be here with you, and I'm hoping that this event that happened to me, gosh, 18 years ago now, will be an inspiration to you. And so I don't forget, let me let you know there is no trademark, no copyright on this story, and so I want you to use it in any way that you can that is beneficial to you personally, to the people you know in your life personally, and to those that you work with professionally. That's part of the story, as you'll understand later on. So here we go. So about 18 years ago now, I was delivering drug screen specimens to our lab that we used, and only because it was on my way home and saved us some postage. So I always went by there a couple of times a week. And this one particular time that I went by there, the front parking lot was full, and I had to go around to the back parking lot of the building. I didn't know my way around the building, so I parked in the back parking lot and started to try to find my way through the halls and offices to find where I was supposed to be. Well, in that process, I'm walking by there's office and the door's open and there's a lady in there who is crying. And when I say crying, I'm talking bawling, the kind of crying that happens where, the snot's flying everywhere and you're going through tissues and you lose your breath. And every time you try to take your breath, you start crying again. Well, it was that kind of crying this lady was doing. I didn't know who she was, so I just kept moving. I found where I was supposed to be, and so I dropped off the specimens and shot the breeze a minute. And then when I left, I went down that same wrong hallway, and that lady was still in there bawling. And I just couldn't stand it anymore. So I stuck my hand, head around the door jamb and just sort of said, "Hey, are you all right?" And through her tears, she said she was. However, I didn't believe her. So I don't know how this actually happened, but I ended up inside her office, sitting across the desk from this lady, listening to her tell me, a stranger, her story of pain. I was blown away, mostly by the fact that she was willing to tell me this and not even knowing who I am, and then how transparent and how vulnerable she was, and she never stopped crying. Now, while she's doing this, I'm trying to think of something useful to say and helpful to say, and I am just not able to do it. I probably had some prayer thought going on, like, hey, give me something because I'm not able to come up with anything. I sure know I was anxious and wanting to say something. It never came to me until this lady ran out of tissues, and she started to get up to go get tissues, and I interrupted her. And as a backdrop to what I'm about to tell you, I'm from rural Oklahoma, and back in those days before my feet started hurting, I always wore my cowboy boots and my starched Wranglers and my starched long sleeve cowboy shirt, and I always had a bandana. Usually I got up and went to work in the dark, and I would just grab a bandana out of the drawer. I never knew or paid any attention to what color they were. So as she started to get up from the desk, I interrupted her and said, "No, no, no, no." And I reached in my back pocket and I pulled out a bandana, and it was similar to this one right here, a purple bandana. And I handed it to her, and she reached for it. And then as she reached for it, she said, well, I'll get it back to you. And I try to make a joke out of it by saying, no, 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 you hang on to it. And as soon as I said, you hang on to it, uh, I knew exactly what to say. And I believe to this day that the words were given to me. And so I told her, keep this bandana and let it remind you of three things. First, purple is the color of royalty. And what I told her that day was that, in my way of thinking, you're the child of the creator of the universe. That makes you royalty. That makes you special, even when you don't feel special. And I believe that's true, even if we're not talking about the creator. I think we're all special, even when we don't feel special. And second, purple is the color of bruises. Now, this lady was not, she wasn't bruised on the outside. She was bruised on the inside. You know, that phrase we use in recovery circles is living life on life's terms. Well, that's what she was doing. And life was not being fair. It wasn't being gentle with her. And a lot of things were going on. And she seemed to be starting to feel a little bit better. And then third, purple, as I told her, is the color of recovery. It's the color of healing. Well, in the United States of America, September is Recovery Month, and purple is the official color of recovery, as I'm told by CSAT and SAMHSA. So when she took that purple bandana, then, as I told her that third thing, she started crying again. And the reason she started crying is she was so thankful for her recovery, because this lady was at that time 5 years clean from IV heroin use, active member of the NA group, and she was a sponsor and had several sponsees. It was just life. Just life was really hurting her. But again, she seemed to feel better, and I'm just codependent enough as a counselor to feel better too. And so she gave me a hug, and I left, not realizing what had really happened right there. So now, you fast forward, I'm going to say about a month, okay? Same scenario, and I'm going in that same back door, and I'm going past this lady's office. And by the way, I have permission to use her name. Her name is Laura. And so I'm going past Laura's office. She sees me walking by, and I'm going to just keep moving. And she calls to me and says, hey, Rick. Well, I'm trying to make a joke out of it again. And I say, I don't want my bandana back. And Laura says very firmly, you can't have it back. And by the way, with much more colorful language. I have it hung up on the bulletin board at the front of my apartment. It's the last thing I see every day when I go to work. And it's the first thing I see every night when I come home. And so every day it reminds me of three things. First, I'm a special person, even when I don't feel special. And second, I'm going to get hurt in this life. And third, I'm going to heal. Wow. And the thing is, this was a neat moment. I started crying. I'm not afraid to. I'm only afraid to start crying because I think sometimes I'll never stop. So I cried on that occasion, and she gave me a hug, and I left. And I went out to the parking lot, and I called my wife, and I said, Stephanie, order me some purple bandanas. I'll explain later. But you see, the reason I was crying was, it was a special moment. That's not the main reason I was crying. I was crying because a month earlier, I had really missed it. I missed what had really happened there. I was one of those people in my personal life that I believe that my prayers hit the ceiling and bounced right back down. I believe that what I did was my work and my effort, and I didn't give the Creator much many props for that. Every now and then I would. But as obvious as this was, I'm having some kind of prayer thought. And then in minutes, not hours, not days, not weeks, in minutes, there's really an answer for me. And I missed it as an answer from the creator of the universe. Wow. I was so full of guilt, so full of guilt and shame, because I started thinking back how many of my prayers, how many of my prayer thoughts were answered. And I missed them because I was in too big a hurry, because I had things to do, people to see, places to go. I had all kinds of things in my life, like most of us. And probably I missed answers to prayer because of that. And then it got worse. Then I got to thinking, oh my goodness, how many people have I walked by? Have I looked over? Have been in my path? And I either didn't see them or hear them or recognize their pain and that I might be helpful, or I just ignored them. Again, because I was in too big a hurry to get from one place to the next. So on that day, about 18 years ago, I decided that I had to do something about it. So my wife ordered the purple bandanas, and I made it, I don't know if you call it a mission or not. I just made it one of my purposes in life to always have this purple bandana. And if I don't have one in my back pocket, it's because I just gave one away. Or I ran out and I haven't been back to Hobby Lobby to get any more. So I always have a purple bandana. And I share them with folks that I see. I do my best to be aware, whether I'm at Walmart or Walgreens or a parking lot or at church or at a conference. You know, when I make presentations, trainings and for CEUs and stuff like that, I make it a point at some point in the training to tell the Purple Bandana Story and to give away a copy of the story and a bandana. At the Anti-Aging Longevity Center, one of the places that I work at now and have worked at for about 20 years now, all new patients are given a copy of the story and a purple bandana. I could tell you all kinds of stories. Paul and I were talking earlier. I mentioned that a lot of times I don't tell a whole lot of stories of the follow-up of what happens afterwards. Before I do that, let me just mention something to you. As cool as this is, and it is, and as encouraging as it is, it's not really the bandana, the physical bandana, that's the most important thing. It's you. You see, you're the bandana. Your life, your influence, you're the bandana. The people that you're around every day, colleagues, clients, patients, people you don't even know, when you stop and you see. You see, that's why I say there's no trademark, there's no copyright on this, okay? Make it yours any way you want to encourage people. So it wasn't long after the this event that I was down in San Antonio and making a presentation at TAP conference. And the presentation was on spirituality and recovery. There were about 50 or 60 people in the class. And so we talked about spirituality and recovery. And then at the end of the presentation, I told the Purple Bandana Story. Now, when I'm just telling the story and I've got a room full of people, ahead of time, I'll pick a chair. I'll just say, whoever's in that chair is going to get this bandana. And over the years, it's an uncanny thing. It seems like the person who needed it got it. So at the end of this presentation, I tell the Purple Bandana Story. And at the end of the bandana story, there was a guy named Jim. And I handed him the bandana, and Jim starts to cry. And he says, could I say something? And I said, you're right. You sure can. And so he told his story. And he said that, in January of this year, my father died. And in March, around through there, my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And just 6 weeks ago, part of my house burned down. If anybody needs a reminder about hope and healing, it's me. Of course, the whole room now is in tears. And it was a really a special moment. Now, fast forward a few weeks, and I get an email from Jim, and Jim says, "Hey, Rick, I had to go buy my own bandana. I gave mine away. I ran into somebody who needed it more than me." Wow. I tear up thinking about that. Now here's a wild one. Okay, so I used to do some trainings for ICDS LCDC training school, and I would tell the Purple Bandana story and give all the students a bandana. This is probably, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago. Okay, and so one day I get a phone call from one of the previous students, a lady named Ricky, really like her name. And she calls me up and says, "Hey, Rick, you'll never believe what happened." And I said, "What's that?" And she said, "Well, I got a purple bandana." And so I said, "What are you talking about? You got a purple bandana?" And I gave you a purple bandana. She said, "Yeah." And I was at a training, and she was working in the Stephenville area or something. She goes, "I was down at a training down south, and there was this dude from Amarillo doing a training and telling the identical Purple Bandana story." What do you think of that, Rick? And my answer was, hallelujah. Hallelujah. Yeah. I can tell you, oh gosh, more and more stories about what has come back to me. And I'm going to tell you one more. And that is, I buy them at Hobby Lobby. And so I went into Hobby Lobby one day, and as I'm going through the checkout counter, there's a young lady there, and she just didn't look like she was feeling very good. And so as I'm buying my bandanas, I said, "Well, could you take a break? Are you okay?" And she said, "Well, I'm just not having a good day." And so she had somebody to come to the counter, and we stepped over to the side, and I said, could I tell you a little story that might encourage you?" And she said, "Yes." And so I told her the Purple Bandana story, and I gave her one of those bandanas I just bought. Now, about 9 or 10 months later, I go back in there to get more bandanas. This young lady is still working there. She sees me coming through the line, and she says, "I have to talk to you." And I said, "Well, sure. What's up?" She says, "There was a lady came in here a couple of weeks ago buying purple bandanas. And I asked her, 'What are you going to do with all those bandanas?' And she said, 'Well, if you got a minute, I'll tell you a story.'" And it was the same story. What do you think of that? And I said, again, I'm not in charge of this. Obviously, I am not in charge of this. So I could tell you more and more stories about that, where folks I gave bandanas to passed them along to somebody else and passed them along to somebody else. And so I've gotten stories from as far south as Honduras, as far north as Chicago, as far east as New Jersey, and as far west as San Diego, California, and a couple places in between, how it has encouraged folks in a way that I couldn't have done, and I'm just doing my part. So I'm going to tell you one more story. Once you got me going, Paula, it's hard to shut me up, as folks who know me know. And so I'm doing a group. I do a little bit of work for Arise. I got one of their shirts on here. And so I'm at Fort Worth Arise last year. And I'm doing a morning group down there. And I come out of the morning group, and outside the building that their office is in, there's a salad place. And as I'm coming out, I look to my left and I see these two ladies at a table there, and they are visiting with one another and eating salads. I get in my truck and I'm getting ready to back out, but I stop and I'm looking at those folks, those two ladies, and it doesn't look like they're happy with one another. And just from, I didn't hear them, I just saw the interaction with them. And I thought, you know what? I think this could be a spot for some hope and some healing. And so I get out of my truck, I take 2 bandanas and 2 copies of the story. I walk up to the ladies, total stranger, and say, ma'am, my name is Rick. I just saw you here, and it looks like you need to hear a story or something. I'm not exactly sure what I said that opened the door, and they said, sure. So I told him the same story I'm telling you, probably a little less long, and gave them the bandanas and the stories. And these 2 ladies both look up at me and go, wow, we really needed that. Ha! Last thing I'm going to say is this. Over all these 18 years, nobody has said no. Nobody has said, no, you can't tell me the story. You're a complete stranger. You look a little weird anyway. So no, move on down the road. What are you selling? That's probably what I would do. Nobody has ever questioned and said, yeah, tell it to me. You know, the folks that we deal with, those wonderful human beings, they want the same thing we want. They want hope, and they want healing. They don't want to hurt. They want to be happy, just like you and I do. So if we can be a little reminder, to me, that's what they call a no-brainer. So you don't have to go out and buy a bunch of purple bandanas or purple anything. You don't have to do that, okay? One of my students works in a prison, and they wouldn't let her bring in bandanas because it was a gang symbol, right? So she bought purple construction paper, told the story, and handed out construction paper. Oh gosh, and that story goes on and on with that young lady. So that's why I say, you're the bandana. You don't have to buy them. You just be it. I know you can. Paula, thank you for the invite.
Thank you so much for telling me. I've always loved hearing that. I hadn't heard some of those follow-up stories. I really like that. But isn't it interesting that, you know, purple is kind of the color for recovery, you know? I mean, like all the recovery month imagery and stuff is purple, and it's just, I don't know, it all just kind of balances well together. So I'm so glad that on that day, so many years ago, you listened to whoever was speaking to you to give her, Laura, some information. Do you hear from her?
Well, that's a good question. Yes, I do. We're friends on Facebook, and every blue moon, you know, we may meet and have coffee. She's doing well. Her recovery is still strong, and so I consider her, and I think she would consider me a friend.
That's fantastic. Well, I think everybody's so hungry for the connections right now. I know the couple of years-ish, I guess maybe it's felt like about 10 years that we were out of connection with one another, you know, just sitting behind a computer. So what a perfect time right now for us to all come together and just remember your story. That's why I wanted you to share it. I thought Recovery Month was a great time to just be reminded of it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It never, and sometimes the door gets open real easy because I always have one in my back pocket. And so I'm doing a group or something, and I've been there for a couple of weeks or whatever. And what's that bandana? What's that purple thing for? You know? Well, I'm glad you asked.
Yeah, I love it. It's the ladies you walked up to who were they weren't communicating love and affection toward one another. Just
no.
That just, I mean, it just tells me that people really are, they're hungry for that, for not hurting, you know, that you've
Sure.
never been turned away. I mean, that's kind of cool.
There's this there's this song. It's a contemporary Christian song. It's called "Never Too Broken to Belong." Uh, it's by a group, a Southern gospel group called Gold City. Now, and this particular song is not the stereotypical Southern gospel kind of sound to it, and the message is just real clear. All you'd have to do for everybody in recovery to take this as a theme song would be to remove the word Jesus. Okay, which doesn't bother me. I know it bothers some. Okay, the message is very clear. You're never too broken to belong. And isn't that what we want folks to understand? You're never too broken to belong. As a matter of fact, that makes you belong.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And wow, I can't thank you enough for the opportunity, Paula.
Well, I'm so happy you were willing. I think every time I've ever asked you to share with others, webinars, seminars, workshops through all the